All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. I can see people popping in. Let me pull up slides and let me share them, maybe. So, I hope y'all are here to talk about cravings and urges and desires and kind of how to handle that through the holiday season. We are going to talk about what creates diabetes, what makes diabetes, how diabetes develops, kind of the biology of diabetes. But we're also going to talk about what a craving and an urge and a desire, what really causes these things. It's not what we've always been taught it is. It's not really what we think it is. And that's why the strategies that are taught in other places don't really work to manage these. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I am recording this. I always want to hope and pray that I can post this somewhere and have this available. And sometimes I have been able to master technology enough to get that done, and other times I have not. So we'll do the best we can. So again, lions and tigers and bears. This is throwback to my Kansas kid ways. Cravings, urges, and desires. Anybody who's from Kansas, we automatically hear Dorothy talking about the three things all together. So that is what we're going to be talking about, but we're really, I mean, the oh my component I think is really true. I think that diet mentality in America really has us to where we believe that we cannot tolerate, we cannot manage, we cannot possibly feel a craving or an urge or a desire and navigate it in a way that serves our health. And I really want to maybe demystify that a little bit today. Maybe I'm trying to advance the slides. Here we go. So again, today we're going to talk about how to get healthy, how to fix your diabetes, the critical skill of managing these urges, these cravings, these desires, especially in the holiday season. There's going to be plenty of opportunities with holiday parties and holiday gatherings and holiday meals to practice this skill set. Please come at it as a learner. Please come at this as a skill that you're learning. You're going to have to practice it a lot before you undo decades of a way you've done this before. Okay. So you're going to have to practice a new skill, and I'm going to teach it as a skill, and you're going to have to do it a lot. And the good news is you're going to have a lot of opportunities in the next 6 weeks. So before I get started, for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Delane Vaughn. I am a board certified family medicine doctor. I'm also a certified life and weight coach. I'm also the host of Reversing Diabetes with DelaneMD. If you don't know that podcast, a lot of you do, but if you don't, please find it. I go through all the strategies and all the science of what I teach for reversing type 2 diabetes in the podcast. So check it out. It's there because I truly believe, after decades in the medical field and the healthcare system in America, that we are not being taught the critical skills or even the critical belief set that you can fix your chronic disease. I primarily work with type 2 diabetics, but the underlying cause of type 2 diabetes, which we're going to get into, is insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is the root cause of so many other diseases. And what I truly believe it's from is from eating foods that don't really align with the natural biology of our bodies, of the human being. So we're going to dive into that, but that's who I am. If you're not used to using Zoom, you know, I started using Zoom pre-COVID. I was doing all my meetings on Zoom pre-COVID. So I've been doing this a long time, and I used to have to always explain to people how Zoom works. But now I'm realizing that we all do Zoom, but there's a question and answer box. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll be the only one that sees them. I should be the only one that sees them. Let me know any questions. At the end of the webinar, we will have an opportunity, hopefully, for questions and answers. And if you want any coaching, at that point, I'll have you put that in the Q&A or raise your hand if we can still raise our hand. For some reason, I don't see. Raise hand is there. So if you want coaching, certainly, or if you have any questions at the end, also put that in or raise your hand at the end of the meeting and we'll dive into that. So let's get started. You know, I always, maybe you don't know I always say this, but this is one of the most important slides you will see tonight. If you are on medications for your type 2 diabetes, you must make these changes to your diet and your lifestyle very carefully. Recognize you are medicated because of the way that you are eating. If you change the way you're eating, you're going to need to change your medications likely. Your medications frequently, not all medications, but many medications override your body's ability to naturally manage your blood sugars, to keep them from going too low, right? We're all afraid of being too high, like that's diabetes, so we want to drive them low. But what that does frequently is it overrides our body's ability to say, oh, our blood sugars are too low, let's make some more blood sugar. So when you change your diet and you're not eating as many carbs, you can get into trouble because you're lowering your blood sugar. You're not providing as much blood sugar for your meds to work on, and suddenly they overdo it and they drive you too low and you don't have a way. Your body doesn't have its natural mechanisms to protect you from it getting too low. Again, all of this to say is that if you're on medications and you're interested in making these changes, you need to have a conversation with your doctor. You need to have a very close relationship with somebody in your doctor's office so that you can call them, or your medical provider, maybe a PA, a nurse practitioner, whatever it is, that's great and fine. But you need to have a very close relationship with somebody in that office so that you can call them and ask them, hey, what do I do here? My blood sugars were this way. Certainly, this is what I help people do in my group. I have a group for women with type 2 diabetes. I help you, change the way you eat, get off your medications, live that naturally healthy life. But I'm the person that keeps an eye on your blood sugars at that point. And then I say, hey, you're running a little low. You probably need to stop this med for tonight. I don't ever make a prescription. I don't ever give you orders, but I'll say for safety's reasons, let's stop this med tonight. You need to call your doctor in the morning. So you need to have that relationship with somebody to keep you safe. So before we get started, I want to make sure you all understand that it's very important that if you're on medications, that you have a good relationship with your doctor so you can give them a call if you have lows and you need to start adjusting those down, because that's the goal, right? All right. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I do want you to put it into the Q&A box. I want to know what you believe causes your cravings. What do you think is the thing that causes you to crave certain foods? We're going to come back to this. We're going to put this aside, but I want you to start thinking about this, and I want you to put it in the Q&A box. So most women believe it's the food, or that watching other people eat the food is what causes them to desire the food. But I want you to put that in the Q. I want you to think about what it is. I want you to put it in the Q&A box. We're going to come back to that. So we're going to talk about what is type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is different from type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a deficiency of insulin. It's not enough insulin. Type 2 diabetes is so much insulin that our bodies become resistant to it and no longer respond to the insulin. On that slide, you can see they look very different. You can see this sickly child. That is typical presentation of a type 1 diabetic versus this very happy, heavier type 1 diabetic. This is the more typical, and again, even this is not following the textbook anymore. We definitely know that we are seeing this class of people, the literature calls it thin on the outside, fat on the inside, people who are developing type 2 diabetes. And again, they're developing this type 2 diabetes. We're going to dive into this, but it's because of the food that we're eating. It's really not the obesity, and that's what we used to think that it was. So when our cells, the biology, what happens with type 2 diabetes, the science in our body that's going on, when our cells are exposed to high levels or high concentrations of insulin over a prolonged period of time, they develop what's called insulin resistance. That means that they are resistant to doing the thing that they should do in the presence of insulin. Insulin wants to open up your cells and bring glucose inside so your cells can burn it off as energy. Okay, that's what's supposed to happen. That's the effect that insulin should have on the cells. But when the cells are constantly exposed to high concentrations all the time of insulin, it's like they plug their ears and they're resistant. They're like, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I just can't even with you. That's what I always say. It's like, I can't even with you. Cells stop doing what they're supposed to do in the presence of insulin. They no longer bring that glucose in, that fuel in, and burn it off. That allows your blood sugars to climb quite high on the outside of the cell. That's what your doctor picks up. That's what medical providers pick up as diabetes. Okay. It's not necessarily the sugar that's causing it. It's this insulin resistance that's causing those blood sugars to climb quite high. So what causes our body to make insulin? The standard American diet. If you've never heard me say it, it's the SAD diet, standard American diet. It's SAD. The food that we eat in America is what causes us to make too much insulin and then causes us to have the normal process of insulin resistance and then diabetes. The majority of the American diet is not made up. I mean, it's food that is not made or natural to the human being in any way. You can see tacos. There's not a taco tree that 10,000 years ago we were plucking tacos off of. That would be amazing if there were, but it's not, right? It's not a pizza bush. These foods are not found in nature for the human animal. And it kind of makes sense that when we eat them, they make us sick. So the cause and effect here, the foods we eat cause our body to release insulin. The insulin causes the insulin resistance. The insulin resistance allows the blood sugars to go high, and then those blood sugars, that's what we call diabetes. But recognize the medical field only focuses on the blood sugar component. It misses a huge chunk of what's going on here when it doesn't address the insulin issue. Okay, we keep chasing that blood sugar issue. What we need to be doing is chasing that insulin issue, and that's what I teach folks to do. So what's wrong with the way that we eat? What's wrong with the American diet, the standard American diet? It is abundant in highly processed foods is really what it comes down to. These foods cause our blood sugars to climb high, right? Even in the non-insulin resistant person, if you eat chocolate cake, your blood sugars are going to climb high because you just had a bunch of sugar. I mean, even the flour, it's not sugar per se, but your body breaks it down into glucose. So you're going to get this huge surge of sugar. That huge surge of sugar causes our pancreas to release a large surge of insulin. And recognize that that's that high concentration. And then when we eat this food all day long, you get it over a prolonged period of time, over days and weeks and months and years and decades. And recognize it's not just the food that we eat in America. It's also the things that we're drinking. It's the sodas, it's the Cappa from Starbucks, it's the Gatorades, the Powerades, the energy drinks, the fruit juices. All of those things are highly concentrated sugars, which cause our pancreas to respond with a bunch of insulin, okay? The other issue is not only this huge surge of insulin that we're getting, this high concentration of insulin that we're getting into our blood, into our body, but it's also that we consume from the moment we wake up in the morning until the moment we go to bed. All day long, we are getting that prolonged effect of high concentrations of insulin on our body. So let's talk a little bit about processing food, why processed foods are the problem child of our food. So recognize when food is processed, it almost always concentrates the carbohydrate component of the food. And then, of course, when our carbohydrate component is concentrated, we get a huge surge and release of insulin. I was trying to think of like a food. What's a food where we process it and it doesn't concentrate carbohydrate? And the only answer I came up with was like olive oil. When we process olive oil, we concentrate the fat component and we leave out the carbohydrate component, but that was like the only thing that came to mind. So when we eat foods in their natural form, they're composed of all of their natural macronutrient, micronutrient, fiber, phytochemicals, polyphenols, all their natural components in a natural ratio, a ratio that's exactly what the human animal needs. But when we process, we lose that natural nutrient ratio, and the ratio of carbs to proteins to fats are altered, and almost always we're concentrating that carbohydrate component. So when I'm talking about processed foods, what I'm talking about is any grinding or pulverizing or cooking or juicing. Now you're going to ask, what, Delane, do you eat a raw diet? No, I don't eat a raw diet. I eat cooked meats, and sometimes I'll even roast veggies. I roast veggies quite a bit. I enjoy that. But do understand the reason that cooked carrots are mushy and sweet compared to raw carrots is because we break down the fiber component in the cooking process. The fiber in our vegetables and fruits are bound to the carbohydrate. When we heat them up, we break that bind. The heat disintegrates the fiber, and all that's left is the carbohydrate component. That's why your cooked carrots are sweeter than your raw carrots. That's why your cooked strawberries, making like a strawberry compote or something, or making strawberry jelly, That's why they're sweeter when you cook them. Now, let's be honest, we live in America, so it's not just good enough to have the sweetness of the fruit, like we add sugar to it, or if Schmuckers is making your jelly, they add high fructose corn syrup to it, right? But when we cook, you can see this picture of the jelly here. When we make jelly or jam, we heat up the fruit. That fruit then concentrates the carbohydrate component and disintegrates the fiber component. Okay. And again, then we add sugars. Fruit roll-ups, they have to do the same process of heating the fruit. But if there's anywhere that you think that like real food is going to come off a wax paper, like that was your first giveaway, the wax paper. Like, don't eat any food that you have to peel from wax paper. That's clearly not real food. But bread is another great example, right? People always tell me, they're like, we've been eating bread for thousands of years. What are you talking about? You're not wrong. We have been eating bread for thousands of years. The difference is 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, making bread was such a colossal effort that you didn't just consume it every day, all day long. It wasn't as easy as popping another loaf off the grocery store shelf, right? It was a big effort to make it. The way the earth makes that food, quote unquote, bread, is wheat. That's the way the earth makes that food. But we take that wheat, we pulverize it into a white flour that breaks away the fiber component to it. And you and I both know we're not just baking flour. It's the yeast and the milk and the eggs. And honestly, I don't think I've ever made bread from scratch. So what do I know? But you and I both know, if you look at the ingredient list, we all love our honey wheat bread. And that honey is actually sugar, typically high fructose corn syrup, in your bread. That is where the processing of wheat becomes an issue, okay? Oranges and orange juice, same thing. It takes about 6 to 8 oranges to make an 8-ounce glass of orange juice. We separate it out from the structure of the fruit, right? The pulp goes away, all the skin goes away, all the little sectioning that happens with oranges goes away, and you just get the carbohydrate component. So this is what I mean. Anytime that we process foods, we are condensing and concentrating the carbohydrate component of those foods. And that is what gets us into trouble. So how do we fix it? The 3 strategies that I teach, and again, this is all on the podcast. So again, if you haven't ever listened to the podcast, Reversing Diabetes with DelaneMD, you can find it at my website, DelaneMD.com. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Google. Shoot, you can Google it and like it'll come up on Google and you can listen. These are the 3 strategies, and there's podcasts dedicated to every single one of these strategies. Cleaning up your diet is the first thing. I believe, I mean, maybe this is a philosophical belief. Maybe you could possibly fix your diabetes by eating what I call garbage all day long, right? You could maybe do that, and just having a very narrow eating window, possibly. I just don't think it aligns with our biology very well to eat Twinkies and Ho-Hos, even if you're only eating 1 or 2 of them in a narrow eating window. Okay. So I really believe you have to clean up your diet. I liken this to smoking cigarettes. We as medical providers would never tell somebody who has COPD that they can continue to smoke and just take more inhalers. That's never what we tell COPD patients. We always tell them you must stop smoking. And I think this is going to be, I mean, I think in the future, like doctors are going to have to, admit that this is what we're going to have to do. You have to stop eating this food. This food that makes us sick with type 2 diabetes is not required food. It's like recreational food. It's not real food. People will frequently say to me, but no, we have to eat. We can stop smoking. We can just get away from it altogether, but we have to eat. And what I want to offer you from the most sincerest, loving part of my soul, you don't have to eat that stuff. You do not have to eat food that makes you sick. That is not what you have to eat. So cleaning up your diet, I feel, is one of the most imperative things. Again, some people have done nutritional ketosis and intermittent fasting using those tools together and still been able to keep foods that I would not eat in my diet because I wouldn't want those nutrients in my body. But do recognize that that's like, I feel like that's kind of the foundation of fixing your type 2 diabetes, is that cleaning up your diet. The second tool that I teach is intermittent fasting, timing your food in a way that aligns again with your human biology, right? Like 10,000 years ago, food wasn't available every 10 minutes. We weren't snacking. There were no 6 small meals a day. That was not happening. 10,000 years ago, we ate when there was food and we didn't eat when there wasn't food. And we not only survived, we weren't like just barely hanging on. We not only survived, but we thrived and populated the earth eating like that. So I do recommend intermittent fasting, and I do believe it aligns with our biology. Nutritional ketosis is another tool that I teach. Some of my clients use it, most of my clients don't, but it's a way to eat and keep your insulin level very low. And that helps your cells heal up, and you benefit from the presence of ketone bodies in your system, which is helpful for a variety of different reasons. So those are the strategies that I teach to help people fix their type 2 diabetes. All of these strategies have the same foundation. They are looking to lower your insulin level. So that is really the base of how to fix your type 2 diabetes. You must lower your insulin levels. You must allow your cells to heal up from the insulin resistance. And after they heal, then they start functioning correctly. And then you get to start to toy with, and it's not that a squirrel can't eat a peanut butter and jelly occasionally, right? Like I always say, squirrels aren't complaining about acorns and asking for pizza at night. We're the animal that doesn't eat the food of the earth, right? Squirrels can eat non-earth food too. But if squirrels ate it every day, they get sick too, right? So how frequently can you have those recreational foods after your cells have healed up? How frequently can you enjoy those and not get yourself sick again? That's kind of the that's level 2.0 for fixing your type 2 diabetes. So those are the strategies I teach. Again, find them in the podcast. I dive into these multiple different occasions. At least once every few months, I'm repeating the same strategy, the same tool. I'm going over the tool again because I want to put it out there in a way that's helpful for everybody. So check that out on the podcast. And if you ever have any questions, you can email me. So let's move on to the thought model. The thought model is the primary tool that I use for help people to kind of deconstruct their crummy thoughts and rewire their brain. This has foundations in cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. It's called different things in the psychological literature. This is just the way it was taught to me in coaching. So it's the way that it's the name that I give to it, and it's the way that I teach it also. But thought modeling can be done in a coaching situation. You can see here me coaching somebody. And then I also do this I do self-coaching almost every morning of my life. I sit down and I kind of dig into what's my brain feeding me? What's my brain telling me about life, about whatever's happening. So let's talk about what the thought model consists of. This is the journal log that sometimes I'll email it out. There is a way that you can get to it on my website and you can download it. But right now I want to talk about the thought download component, which is what it's labeled. I call it taking out the trash. Recognize there's tens of thousands of thoughts that run through your brain every day. They are not all going to be winners and lead to something that you like in life. Giving yourself the opportunity to evaluate the thoughts, that's what the thought model allows you to do. It's a structure to hang your thoughts on so you can see what they're creating in your life and which ones you want to keep and which ones you want to take out with the trash. So the thought model has 5 components to it. It has circumstances. We have thoughts about those circumstances. So circumstances, and I'm going to go into this, but circumstances are just the things that happen in life. Those things drive us to have thoughts. We have thoughts. It's just the way the mind works. The mind is a thinking machine. It's a predicting machine. It just wants to think about things. So we have thoughts about circumstances. Those thoughts create feelings in our body. Those feelings drive our actions, and those actions give us the results that we have in the world, always. I know that a lot of times I know that I did this. Gosh, I think I had my first coach in 2018, maybe it was 2017. And I think maybe last week I started believing that the thought model really does work on everything. I think I believed it before then maybe, but I feel like there's always this skeptic in the back of my brain. It works for a lot of things, but not everything. I've yet to find anything that the thought model is not working on, but please bring them to me if you ever think that it's not, because I'm there with you. I'm skeptical too. Let's find it. But the thought model is always working. It's just how the human brain works. And that's why we find it in so many different, sciences and whether it be social sciences or psychiatry or psychology or, even coaching. There's a reason that shows up in all these different places. It shows up in all these different places because it is really the fundamental way that the brain works. And I'm going to talk about the principles that lies upon. So let's talk about circumstances though. Circumstances, are clear. These are going to be court of law data. These are going to be things that you can present to a judge, and the judge is going to say, listen, you're pitching a fit about something here, get over yourself. They're going to say, oh yeah, that's fact. It's always going to be a fact. They should be non-emotive. They should never drive an emotion. So say you're doing a thought download about maybe your mom, and you're angry with your mother, and your circumstances, my mom. And when you say it like that, you know that there's an emotion that comes with it, right? My mom, you hear it in the way that you say it. So if that's the case, we have to adjust the circumstance that we're looking at, because if immediately you're looking at the circumstance with an emotion, it's too fiery for you. It's got too much friction. So sometimes it looks like there are mothers, like mothers exist. Mothers are out there in the world. We are talking just about mothers. And then you go into your thought. My mom, blah, right? My mom does this, and your feeling that goes along with it. So your circumstance should always be non-emotive. It should be court of law data, examples of circumstances. And then I'm going to give the flip side, that the thoughts that we typically present as circumstances. So it's 86 degrees outside. That is a circumstance. I was in a car accident yesterday. That is a circumstance. Both of these things, anybody in the surrounding area can look and say, yeah, that thermometer says 86 degrees Fahrenheit. They can say, yeah, I saw the car accident. The police came, your car got, somebody hit into you, police came, they took your information, your car got towed off. Your dog died. This happened a few years ago, so I always use this as an example. My dog died is a fact. Like, the police called me and said, your dog, we pulled him off, the highway. Like, I'm sorry, what do you want us to do? The people who hit the dog, they could say like, yeah, your dog died. I'm really sorry, right? Like, that was an agreed upon thing that everybody saw that experience. Another example of a circumstance is my mother-in-law said, I'm a really bad cook, or I'm a bad cook. She said those words. Anybody in the room would report that they heard those 5 words in that order from her mouth. That is a fact. Okay. Things that are not circumstances that sound like this, though. It's hot outside. That's a big one. For kids like me, 86 degrees is not hot outside. Like, that's not hot. That's okay. I mean, it's warmish, but I wouldn't put a swimming suit. I wouldn't. It's not warm enough for me to put a swimming suit on at 86 degrees. Okay. Somebody bashed into me yesterday. That is not a circumstance. That's a thought about the car accident that happened. My dog was hit by a careless driver. Not a circumstance. It's a thought about what happened yesterday or whenever it happened. I'm an awful cook. That is a thought that you're having about the words that your mother-in-law said. Okay. So those are circumstances. Let's talk about thoughts now. We have thoughts about the circumstances we experience. Again, everything that we have in the world, experience in the world, everything we've created, everything we've done has been filtered through our brain. It is the lens in which we see the world. It is our rose-colored glasses always. Slowing down life to capture the thoughts that you're having is imperative to figuring out how to create different things in your life. Remember, your thoughts are going to lead to feelings that create your actions, that create your results. If you want to change those results, you have to do the thinking part different. Many of our thoughts are not creating the results that we want in our lives. Having a way to evaluate them in an objective manner gives us the power to change our experience of the world. And this is imperative for these cravings, urges, and desires. We're going to dive into that here in a little bit. The feelings that we have are caused by, or they're produced by, the thoughts that we have. They're vibrations in our body. There are many ways to describe them, but recognizing that they can't harm us. Understand that feelings should really be 1-word, maybe 2-word experiences. But if it ever is a sentence, that's a thought. The interesting thing about Americans, about us, about humans, about our society is that we have a really hard time describing the way that we feel. We can tell the thought that we're having, but to actually say the feeling that we're having is very, very challenging. So I want you to think of an intense emotion, because these are probably the ones that you can actually get most into your body and feel. Thinking about anger or frustration or humiliation. Think about those intense feelings, and then think about, as you're thinking right now about that feeling, how does the vibrational energy in your body start to shift? when you have this feeling? What changes in your body? Where do you experience this? For me, embarrassment is always like right here, and it's really hard, and it's kind of hot, and it's intense, and it swells. So it's right in the middle of my chest for me. What does it feel like? It feels hot. It feels solid, and it does this vibration, this throbbing thing. How would you describe these feelings? Learning to describe these feelings is, again, like we are feeling beings by nature. Determining how we're actually feeling is something we don't practice. This isn't a skill that we practice, so we don't know how to do it very well. It's going to take the slowing down. Sometimes we notice, again, because we're feeling beings, we just notice the feeling before we understand the thought that comes from it. And we want to avoid the feeling because they're unpleasant. Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But when you slow it all down and you start to have this feeling, and you're like, oh, I'm feeling irritable. I'm feeling edgy. I'm feeling this way. Why feeling that way? That will help you determine what your thought is. I'm feeling this way because that person said that about me in front of those people. I cannot believe they did that, right? Like that's the way you determine what your thought is. Even when you can't always name the feeling. For me, that then would be anger that I would feel, I think, depending on what was said and who was said in front of. So your feelings will drive your actions. Our actions are always driven by our feelings. When we as humans feel fearful, the natural experience, the natural action for fear from a human being is to run and hide. People will be like, no. I'm brave and I step up to the plate when I'm fearful. Recognize that feeling that drives stepping up to the plate, and I think about this a lot, and many of you are aware my son's in the military, and like he has to be brave. Even when I'm like, no, baby boy, run and hide, baby, run and hide. He has to suppress that fear. And then what he draws upon is not the fear, it's courage. Courage is action in spite of fear. That's what you have to draw upon when you're taking action. So if you're thinking, no, I mean, like I feel fear sometimes, but I just step up to the plate and do the thing. That then comes from something else, bravery, courage, something else. Fear in a human being drives us to hide. That's the typical action. I realize it's not, universal for every human being. Some humans do really dumb things in the face of fear, but most of us will run and hide. Same with humiliation. It's the same thing. Embarrassment. We want to hide. Think about when you're happy. What do you want to do? Describe it for yourself. For me, I want to smile. I want to socialize. That's the action that I take from happiness. When we're feeling defeated, think about what you want to do when you're defeated. Most of us want to stop trying. We want to distract. We want to do something else. We want to clean the kitchen. We want to go shopping. We want to Facebook. We want to do all sorts of things. But frequently when we have feelings that are unpleasant, our brain will offer us food. That's the action that we take. And it doesn't necessarily produce evidence of the thought, which I'm going to get to that here in a moment. Like most of our actions will somehow support the belief that we had. And the reason that this is, again, is just the way our brain is wired. Okay. I'm going to dive into that, but our eating doesn't solve the issue either, right? It's not a functional action to an unpleasant feeling. But the reason that we do this is because it's the way our brain is wired. Recognize 10,000 years ago, getting out of the cave and going and hunting and gathering food was a dangerous experience. Like it wasn't like getting in the car, putting your seatbelt on, driving to the store, following the speed, the traffic lights, doing everything to keep yourself safe. The FDA wasn't protecting your food and you weren't washing it in your clean water when you got home. None of that was happening, right? Hunting and gathering food 10,000 years ago was dangerous and we knew it. We have this negativity bias of the brain to look at a situation and see the negative first because it kept us alive 10,000 years ago. Okay. So to get out of the cave, we would only see the negatives and we didn't want to do it. So our brain had to develop this way for incentivizing us to go and hunt and gather. Eating food releases into our brain this feel-good neurochemistry. Primarily, it releases dopamine, and dopamine, although feels okay, it feels nice, it feels good, it also is a heavy motivator to repeat an experience, okay? So if you got out of the cave and you found strawberries on a bush behind a rock by a tree, and you ate them, and your brain released the dopamine, and then you went back to the cave, the next time you came to that experience where you're like, ooh, what do? I want food. Your brain's like, yeah, let's do that strawberry thing again. That was great. Let's go again. Let's go find that. You have a heavy motivator to repeat that experience. That's what dopamine does. The more dopamine you get released with an experience, the more heavily you are going to repeat that behavior in the presence of the feeling that drove it. Okay, so hunger, boredom, that's what happens for us, nowadays. But when you feel those feelings, you are going to be driven. If you meet it with a high dose of dopamine in your brain, you're going to be driven to repeat that. You're going to be heavily motivated to repeat that. So how it works with natural foods is we eat natural foods and we get a natural release of dopamine in our brain. Our brain emphasizes the importance of that food to our survival. And then we naturally have a desire for the food. And then we eat the food in a way that serves our body. And we have this nice cycle. Oh, it's time to eat. Yeah, let's do that strawberry thing again. Nobody's stealing from grandma to get strawberries, right? But recognize when we artificially concentrate the nutrient in our food, the carbohydrate in our food, because that's really what it's working on. It's working on the same addictive pathway. Again, it sounds so hyperbolic to say this and so dramatic to say this, but it is the carbohydrates that we eat bind the same receptor in our brain that heroin and morphine and Percocet and Vicodin and Lortab and Norco and all of those narcotic meds, narcotic drugs bind. Again, nobody's stealing from grandma to get M&Ms. Nobody's stealing from grandma to get strawberries, but it is the same addict. That's why it's such a strong motivator to repeat the behavior. When we take natural foods from their natural form and we artificially concentrate that nutrient, that carbohydrate component, we get a over-concentrated release of dopamine into our brain. We get an over-release of dopamine in our brain. That drives us to overemphasize the importance of M&Ms and Snickers and crackers and all cakes and those kinds of things. That causes us to over-desire those foods. And that's what we're talking about today, right? This over-desire, this urge, this craving. That is what drives the desire for that food. And then the eating of the concentrated nutrient, we overeat it typically because we have this over desire, and that just gives us more of a release of dopamine into our brain. And instead of having a cycle, it turns more into a snowball effect and it gets away from you. So recognize that when our brain is offering us food as a solution or as an action to a feeling, the reason it is doing this is because we are heavily motivated with those intense feelings because we learned somewhere along the way that this would help, that food helps, right? I always jokingly say that we learned sometime in like elementary school, right? Bad day at school, let's go for ice cream. Good day at school, let's go for ice cream. All of the things, we're better with ice cream, right? We all learned this. So it's no wonder that when we're having these really intense emotions that we do frequently, our brain will pull food. It's like, why am I thinking about food when this is going on? We're thinking about food because of this dopamine component. It drives us, it heavily motivates us to repeat a behavior that gives us a huge dopamine surge. So these actions, of course, drive our results. The action typically leads to a result that's related to your initial thoughts. And again, like when we're driven to eat the food, and again, we're going to come back to this because that dopamine component matching or meeting desire or urges or cravings or the anxiety about food with food, especially food that's going to create a huge dopamine surge, makes your brain motivate you to repeat that food behavior every time you have that intense emotion. So we're going to come back to that because that really is part of the crux of the desire and the urges and the cravings. But do understand that most of the time our actions either create more evidence of whatever it was we believe, or whatever our thought was in the original thought line of the thought model, or it creates, it doesn't create a solution to it, right? So the brain is a prediction machine. It will work to produce evidence of what it already believes, to predict what it already believes. This is called the confirmation bias, and it's described in psychiatric and psychological social sciences literature over and over and over again. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms what you already think. That's how our brain works. It is a hardwiring of our brain. So the things that we do, so I always use the class, it's a pretty classic example of this. If a woman has a thought that her husband is cheating on her, if that's her belief, and her feeling is probably fear, and she's running and hiding, and she's checking his pockets, and she's checking his phone, and she's doing all these other things, and everything that he does, she interprets as him cheating. Maybe he's checking a text. Maybe there's a phone number in his pocket, and maybe it's all to the car dealership where he's buying her a new car as a surprise for Christmas or whatever, right? But everything that he does, she interprets. She interprets to favor information that she already believes. Okay, so this is confirmation bias. So let's go back to what causes urges and cravings and desires. It is this dopamine effect, but we have so much agency over this, and I don't think that we understand that. So for me, I would have told you 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe, the M&Ms were the problem. They were what caused my desire for food and snacking and chomping in the afternoon. These are pictures of my grandmother's I made them, but it's my grandmother's pie recipe. I would have told you years ago that that was the culprit of my desire for food. It was not anything else. It was this. Lots of people think it's the food, the chocolate cake, all the things. What I want to offer to you is the food is not to blame. We blame it on the food, but it's not the food. It is all about the things that we think. So I am going to stop for a minute. When I asked what, I want to read what I have in the Q&A box about what creates the desire. Someone put the habits, someone put emotions. Very good, very nice, Rebecca. Someone put, I think cravings come from a biological place, like an addictive craving, and you're not wrong. There is that. Karen put, when I eat sugar or high carb food, it makes me want more sugar, like a drug addict. You're right, it does. And there's biological evidence for that. Deb put history. My grandfather bought us bags of treat, memories, beliefs, certain foods will soothe me, and I want energy. Absolutely. So we report all of these things like they're fact. Like, no, I mean, like I need energy, or there's this biology going on. But I want to offer to you, it's all coming from the things that we believe about the food, right? So Deb, for you and your grandfather, and he bought these foods and these treats, and you have these memories. Memories are nothing but a collection of thoughts, right? And there are plenty of other really tasty foods that you are probably not interested in eating because it wasn't what you associate with the memory of your grandfather, right? So I always liken this to, and everybody hear me on this. If y'all are I always say this, if you're shopping for shoes, I did this in medical school. Sometimes I would be on my computer shopping for shoes when I was just overwhelmed with school and not like listening. And I was always grateful when people were like, now listen to me seriously. So I always call that, come back from shopping for shoes. Listen to me on this one. Understand that the amount of dopamine released into your brain when you eat potato chips, and when you eat a brownie, and when you eat chocolate cake, or when you eat hot tamales is the same. And most of us find that we don't want all 4 of those different foods. Some people will. I will never, ever gorge myself on hot tamales. I cannot even imagine. The sugar and the binding of the mu receptor in my brain is the same with hot tamales as it is for M&Ms. Why do I prefer the M&Ms? Because it's a thought. That's why. That is always the thing. You're not wrong. It is like an addictive craving, and it is because of this dopamine effect. And the dopamine, like this comment Karen has, when I eat sugar or high carb food, it makes me want more sugar, like a drug addict. Yeah, so that actually happens because your dopamine all empties and there's no more to release, but you keep eating more, trying to get that first hit that you had the first time. You're exactly right. That's exactly how it works. So recognize it is always the thought. It is not the food's fault. It's not what the food is doing to us. It's always the thoughts that we have. It's my favorite. I love that so much, but it tastes so good. It would be better, whatever it is, would always be better with the food, or it's so hard to say no. Those are the thoughts that create the desire, the uncertainty, the craving, the urges for food. Think about it right now in your head. Think of your favorite food and then think of the thought that you have about it. Put those thoughts in the chat box. I'm dying to hear them, but it's always like, if I'm thinking about M&Ms, that was the other thing. They were power pellets. That goes to, I want energy, right? They were power pellets. My uncle taught me to call them power pellets. So I had this belief that there was going to be energy that came from eating those foods. And it turns out that, I mean, not only was it not scientifically real, but like there's energy from eating all sorts of foods. Why was it I was drawn to the M&Ms? So I want you to hold the thought that you're having in your brain, whatever it is that drives you. Deb, when you think about your grandfather, my grandfather had, it's nostalgia. It's a memory of my grandfather. When you think of that, what is the vibration? What happens in your body when you have that vibration? When I think of, it's so good. Oh my gosh, it's so good. I can actually feel it in the pit of my stomach and start to travel up my body and get to the base of my throat. And I can almost start to feel myself salivating whenever I start to have the thought. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. I can feel it right now in the base of my throat. Figure out what the vibration is in your body. What does it feel like? Where in your body do you feel it? How would you describe it? What's the physical experience of desire, of urges, of cravings for food? Because the more intense they are, and the more times in your past you've met that with that intense feeling with a food that creates a ton of dopamine in your brain, the more powerful the motivation is to repeat that behavior. That is the issue at hand, but it always starts with the thought that you have that is unique to you. Again, the effect of dopamine in my brain is going to be the same with brownies or with hot tamales. And I will tell you, I'm never interested in hot tamales, ever, never. There's no alternate universe where I will ever eat hot tamales. I just don't like them. They burn my mouth. I don't like them. So, and you have something similar. You have something similar. There's some food out there that everybody loves, and you're like, I don't get it. I ain't eating that stuff. Give me my food of choice. Give me my drug of choice, right? That is because of the thoughts that you have about that specific food. It is not solely because of the dopamine in there. Okay. And it's really important that you understand of the dopamine in your brain that's released from that food. It's really important that you understand that, because that's where your agency is about making these food choices. Now, if you're sitting here going, listen, Delane, I get it. Like, we eat food and like we shouldn't, but I have no idea what an urge feels like in my body. I'm going to offer you a really hard truth here. The hard truth is it's probably because you've never said no. You've never not met a food desire or urge without eating the food. So if that's the case, I want you to commit to a given experience. I'm going to go to work. It is birthday celebration day at work, and there's going to be all the food in the break room. And today, no matter what, I'm not eating the food. And a lot of times people will be like, well, I just can't not eat the food. Like, that's not possible for me. I can't not eat the food. I want to offer to you, if there was $1 million on the table to not eat the break room food, most of us could find it in us to not eat the food. The other really very dramatic example that I use is gun to your head. If there was a gun to your head or a gun to your loved one's head to not eat the donuts in the break room, could you do it? If you had to. And if the answer is yes, I could if I had to, give yourself permission to do it once so you can figure out, you can unravel the mystery of what's causing you to eat these foods and start down the process of working through it so that you can stop eating foods that are making you sick. Okay. So, chocolate makes me feel so good. That's Fatima's thought. chocolate makes me feel so good, right? Again, the dopamine that you get from that chocolate is no different than the dopamine you would get with hot tamales or some other candy, but that is not the food you choose to hook onto. The dopamine is not the only role here. The thoughts that we have about the food is what is causing our desire for the food. And that's where we have the most agency. This is such a gift to realize that it's the belief that we have about the food, because we have the agency to change those beliefs. So that committing, how we fix it is committing to not eating the food. You need to stop eating your food to figure out how to manage your feelings intentionally. You need to slow it down. Why are you running from a feeling? Why are you running from the desire? That's a big one. You can answer that in the chat box, but the most common answer that I hear about why people run from desire is because they don't believe they can resist it without giving in. And that is taught in our diet culture. That is taught by, I mean, any diet program you've ever signed up for has always told you, don't go anywhere hungry because you'll have desire for food and you can't manage it. And that's one of the most amazing disservices that industry has done for our society, right? If you knew that the brownies at the party were made with X-Lax because somebody thought that was funny, you'd be like, yeah, I think I'll pass on those brownies. They don't sound that appealing anymore, right? So why are you running from the desire? Most of the time it's because we don't feel like we can resist it. What I want to offer you is, why do you need to resist the desire? Many of my clients hear me talk about this a lot, about how I love looking at donuts. I love them. They're so clever anymore, what they put into donuts. They are so interesting. They're so colorful. Like the crazy stuff they put on donuts. I'm like, who would have thought to do that? I wish they would have thought to do that when I was a kid, because Snickers bars weren't on donuts when I was a kid, right? Of course, when I look at a donut, my brain's like, you should totally eat that. Of course it does. And of course, it probably would be really tasty, but that's not a problem, right? Why is it a problem that your brain tells you, like, that your brain offers you desire for the food? It's not a problem. That's exactly what your brain should be doing. You have to have everything about that food in the forefront of your mind, though, right? For me, it's not just the donut would be tasty. It's also that I would feel badly and I would break out in a rash. And for me, my blood sugars would go up and I would probably feel really sick after eating a donut. I can't imagine, it's been years, but I sure do love to look at them because they're really, really clever. Do I desire them? Absolutely. Do I fight the desire? Nope, I don't. Because there's no reason to fight the desire. Of course, my brain's offering me them. Yeah, of course I desire them, but it's not the only thing that's true about it. That's where coaching, this is what we work on in coaching. We work on not only believing one side of the story. I don't only believe the story that the donut's going to be amazing. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. And a rash and blood sugars. I'm going to feel sick. I'll probably want to throw up. There's a lot of that I do not want to have. I don't want to have that. So the way to manage these cravings, and the thing that I want you to practice through the holiday season, is one, slowing it down. What is the feeling that comes over you when you're seeing that food? Is it desire? Is it urges? Is it cravings? Is it anxiety? That's a big one that we experience. I feel so anxious, I'm not going to be able to manage it. There's this fight, there's this struggle. What's the friction you're feeling in your body? And then why are you feeling it? Well, because it tastes so good. Then challenge that. Of course it tastes good, but I always offer my clients, you're not doing heroin, and that's probably pretty fun too, right? You're not doing heroin. Yes, it's illegal. Yes, there's all sorts of laws against it. But when it comes right down to it, you're not doing heroin because it's bad for you. So is that food. That is the other side of the story that you're not hearing. Practicing telling yourself the entire story helps give you some agency on what you're believing about it, what's driving your actions, what you believe about it, how you feel about it, what drives your actions, and what gives you results. And that's what we work on in coaching. So I want you to practice this. I always liken this, slowing it down and getting curious about what we're feeling and getting curious about why we think the way that we think that drives the feeling. Slowing it down and looking is very similar to turning on a light and cleaning a dirty room. It's very, very hard to rush through cleaning a dirty room in the dark. You have to slow it down. You have to turn on the lights. You have to take a look at what you need to do in order to clean the room. You have to do the same thing in order to unwire these thoughts that you're having in your brain. So practice this. If you have any questions, there is a comment in the Q&A box. If anybody wants to, has an example, has a question, anything that you want to talk about, there is time. But the thing won't let, here we go. I'm like, but the computer won't let me see the Q&A box. So that's going to be fun. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Delane at DelaneMD. If you want to set up consults, certainly you can reach out to me that way too. Rebecca says, I believe that the cupcakes make me happy. I called it cupcake love. Exactly. When you nail it, like when you're like, I know it was, I believe they made me happy. It was cupcake love. When you find that thought, sometimes it seems very, very, I call it sticky. It seems like it wants to stay with you. It seems so real. It's like what I've thought forever. They were power pellets. It's what I thought forever. I can remember I was 12 years old when my uncle told me that. It's what I thought forever. But ask yourself, what is it costing you to stay with that belief? What is it costing you to continue to choose to believe that? Because it is a choice. There's other things that are true about the cupcakes, right? Cupcakes are another thing that I like because they're always really cool too. I like to see what they do to cupcakes. But again, like, I don't eat them. I just look at them. They're art for me. All right, guys. If any, I don't know if the raise your hand works. If you guys have any questions, I am more than happy to answer anything. I'm going to stop sharing my slides. If you come up with questions, again, I'm going to try to get this posted on a page in my website and I will email the link out. I've done it before, but sometimes the computers win, technology wins. How do I deal with alcohol? So this is a great question and we've got the perfect amount of time to cover this. How do I deal with alcohol? So any sweetener that goes into alcohol, cut it because that's probably causing your insulin to go up. There are 3 natural macronutrients, your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. The 4th unnatural macronutrient is alcohol. These 3 will cause a small to a huge, carbohydrate being the largest insulin production when you eat them, and then fats being the lowest, but still can have some insulin production. Alcohol doesn't have any insulin production. What it does do is it takes you out of like a ketotic and a fasting state, not because it's producing insulin, but because it is changing your body's focus from like burning fat to managing and processing and detoxifying really the alcohol is what it ends up doing. So it doesn't really break a fast. It will bring you out of ketosis. It will keep you from burning your fat because your body suddenly goes into this detoxification of this poison that we just put into our body. Guys, I love me a good glass of wine, love me a good tequila, but I mean, like the honest Abe answer here is it's truly a poison to our body. And that's something we're kind of agreeing to put into our body when we have those things. So the actual alcohol is not an issue per se. Wine, spirits, beer has carbs in it. So that's something it's alcohol mixed with carbohydrates. So that's something you're going to have to be aware of. And then the mixers, again, the sweet mixers that go into it are an issue. There's my puppy. That's Sammy Sue. Psst. She's my pretty girl. So the mixers that go into it, certainly, it's sweet and sour mix most of the time, or it's Coke and, rum or whatever. I don't even know what they are, but those things will definitely, or even a Diet Coke with like whiskey and a Diet Coke. Again, remember guys, the diet component, the sweeteners usually will stimulate insulin production. And that's why they do not help you reverse your type 2 diabetes. So anything that tastes sweet on this tongue will break your fast. So remember that. But yeah, that's how I deal with alcohol. It's things that go into it that can cause you to like create more insulin. And then the other thing is the loss of our kind of control and our focus on the things that are important to us when we start eating things that maybe don't align with our biology after we've been drinking. So I hope that answers your question. If not, you send me a message and I am happy to answer that. All right, guys, I hope. Oh, there's another dog over there. My dog's going for a WWF match. They only do this when I'm on a call, guys. I don't know what it is. All right, guys, I hope this is all helpful. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer anything. And I hope you all have a great holiday season. I'll talk to you later. Bye.